Welcome to my True Scary Story YouTube channel. I want to welcome you and all ask that you subscribe now, comment on my newest video and introduce yourself in the comment section below. The Sinful Society is very welcoming and are some of the nicest people on YouTube. Tonight we are joined by a special guest, Booze&Boos. This is a new True Scary Story horror narrator on YouTube. I feel like this guy has a lot of potential to do some fun and exciting things in the future. He's well on his way already, and it was a pleasure to work with him. Be sure at the end of the video to click on the link in the description box to subscribe to his channel. Sit back, relax, enjoy, stay sinful. Fear has overtaken my thoughts, words, and deeds. There is something so terrifying about the unknown and the darkness that lives out there. I have always been a paranoid person, and I battle mental health issues constantly. I have bipolar disorder and do take my meds to help manage it. I live in a subsidized housing project in the inner city of town, and that lends to my constant fear and anxiety. I'm a 5-foot female and I weigh about 110 pounds, so I don't really have much of a chance to fight if I need to protect myself. I always do early morning grocery shopping at around 5:30 a.m., which means I walk to the corner market behind the project's alleyway. I use my food stamps and get the basics like milk, eggs, and bread. I enter the small storefront and grab a basket to carry. As I make my way down the drink aisle, I notice an older woman in her 50s staring right at me. We make eye contact, and then I look away and then look back at her. She has not averted her gaze one bit. I've never seen this woman before in my life. I feel a panic attack starting to rise up through my body. I have to breathe deep and try to get my shopping done, or I will go without. The store owner knows me and is a very nice man. He notices the woman and makes eye contact with me in an attempt to make sure I'm okay. I nod and move to the next aisle over. I put a few more items in my basket, and now the lady is in the same aisle and much closer to me this time. I meet her gaze once again and she smiles from ear to ear and winks at me. I move down the aisle and towards the front counter to pay for my items. I glance around the whole store and don't see the creepy woman anywhere. I breathe a sigh of relief and make my way out of the store. I scan the parking lot and start my walk home. I'm about halfway back to my apartment when the sun starts to rise over the horizon. I get lost in the moment and gaze at the beautiful sky. All is quiet, and then I hear a weird cackle-like laughter sound from around the corner of the building up ahead. The sound jolts me out of my sunrise viewing slumber, and it's the same damn lady from before. This time she takes off her heels, then her wig, and I realize she is actually a man. This person then proceeds to sprint half of a city block towards me. I nervously start running as fast as I can to the Starbucks near my street. I never run, so the man is catching up at a breakneck pace. I scan the streets for anyone that could help me. From literally out of nowhere, a lady walking her dog appears, and she sees my horrified face. She comes to my aid and the man slows down his pace. The woman's dog growls and barks ferociously at this freak. The man locks eyes with me and blows me a kiss, and then runs in the opposite direction. I nearly vomit from that image and the stress of the present moment. The wonderful woman and her lovely dog walk with me the remaining distance to my apartment to make sure I get back safely. I make it upstairs and lock my deadbolts and collapse on the floor. The lady ended up introducing me to her son, who ended up becoming my husband. Sometimes great things do come from troubling times. When I was 9 years old, I distinctly remember being home from school with my mother. I think I must have been sick or something that day. I was playing with my Legos and eating a snack when something caught my eye outside of our living room window. I saw two men in their late 30s or early 40s walking side by side, wearing long dark raincoats. They honestly reminded me of the wet bandit robbers from the original Home Alone movie. My mom was downstairs in our basement rotating her laundry when we got a soft knock at the front door. Our front door had a large pane of glass near the lock on the door, so people outside could see in, and vice versa. The taller man asked through the door if my parents were home. I said, "Yes, my mom is. Why?" As I was about to answer, my dad drove up and parked in front of our house. As soon as the men noticed Dad's car, they fled and ran down the rainy sidewalk. My dad jogged up to the front porch and asked me who those men were. Dad said as the men were fleeing, the larger of the two men looked back and smiled at him. Dad said it was so creepy. We got a large dog the next day, and we all rest a lot easier knowing our 100-pound German Shepherd is a great warning this house is off limits. My friends and I were all packed up for our annual snowshoeing trip. There is a grand total of 5 of us, including me, that goes each season. We've been doing this snow activity for many years. Our trips take us miles and miles from civilization to the bitter cold, into no man's land. If anything happens or someone is injured, well, it's something none of us want to pay much attention to. Moving on, the first leg of our trip would lead us to our snow cave site. Believe it or not, but snow caving can actually be quite comfortable temperature-wise. We make our way to our site and proceed to start the 2 to 3 hour process of digging out our sleeping quarters. One of my friends gets a fire going so we can cook dinner and stay warm while we eat and plan. The time is near 8 p.m. when we all sit down to dinner and some drinks. There is nothing better than a couple of shots of vodka to wash down some chili and hot dogs with. You have to stay warm somehow. The time goes to nestle in and sleep for the night. All of my friends have passed out, but I can't shake this feeling that something is wrong on the surface site that we were camping at. I pop my head slowly up out of our soft white dam, and I faintly make out the silhouette of what looks to be 2 large wolves sniffing around our fire site. To be honest, wolves scare me far greater than what any human is capable of. Animals in their natural habitat will go to extensive lengths to restore order in their environment. Before I can alert any of my friends, the one wolf whips his head up from the ground area and locks eyes with me. I nearly empty my bladder and bowels right there. The only thing I can think of to do is to try and bury myself a bit deeper and hope they leave our area before I run out of oxygen. As I bury myself deeper, I can feel the wolf's paws tearing through my jacket as he tries with all his might to uncover his human dinner. I grab my hunting knife, and in an instant, I was lucky enough to swipe my knife at his paws multiple times. He yelped and retreated, thankfully. At some point after, I must have passed out from sheer exhaustion, and I woke up to my friends digging me out at a breakneck pace. One of my buddies got up early morning and noticed a small trail of blood near my sleeping spot. They all rushed to my aid, and we decided to pack up everything and just head home. Not the trip I had in mind, but at least we all made it home alive.
This story is nowhere near as harrowing as some of the ones I've read on here, but when I found this subreddit, I knew I wanted to share this experience here. 3 years ago, I tried Tinder for the very first time. At the time, I was 25, and while most 25-year-old women have dabbled all over Tinder or the like, I hadn't been single since I was 17. I met my ex while I was in high school. 6 years later, we got married, had a baby, and I was happy. Those last couple of years together, he had really begun to resent me and the family we had created together. I fought to keep our relationship together, but the abuse became more frequent and more intense. It got to the point where I took our baby and fled the house in the middle of the night. My mind was scarred and my heart was raw. It was a really difficult time in my life. A couple of months after I left, I had a new job, a new home, and a renewed sense of life. I was just starting to open up and could feel myself healing. I was, however, lonely. I was adjusting to shared custody and spent my weekends alone. Didn't want to jump into a relationship, but I did want to experience some new things that my 8-year relationship hadn't allowed me to. Joining Tinder felt fun. It was new and scary, and after so much trauma, it felt nice to have so much positive attention. My self-worth was low, so the cheap compliments and instant gratification of the app felt incredible. Who am I to deserve their attention? Why would they choose to speak to me of all women? Not my healthiest coping mechanism, but I wanted to feel desirable. That's when I met Derek. Derek was an unassuming, average guy. He was cute enough, but not so attractive that I felt self-conscious. Derek and I shared a few interests: craft beer, hiking, and he had a sense of humor that I liked. We agreed to meet up at a local restaurant. I was so nervous. It was my first date in 8 years. I donned my cutest dress, got made up, and headed out. As I waited in the restaurant, my palms were sweaty. My heart was fluttering, and I began to question myself. He arrived, and everything was really awkward at first. We ordered our first beers, and started to break the ice. As soon as the buzz of the alcohol began to hit, our conversation took off. We had relaxed in each other's company, and the rest of the date went smoothly. We joked about karaoke across town. He laughed and how he didn't like karaoke. I'm a huge fan of karaoke. While I'm no superstar, I have spent a good amount of time in choirs and can carry a tune well enough. One of my favorite rowdy weekend activities is to go into that bar and bursting out some songs with the sweet taste of gin on my tongue. I convinced him to go with me, and we left the restaurant. We sang into the night, taking shots, flirting, and laughing. We ended the night in his truck, clumsily fumbling with each other's buttons and zippers, hearts racing with excitement. This had been what I needed. We texted back and forth more often, and soon we were talking about another date. I'd enjoyed our time together, and I liked that I didn't need a deep connection with him. It was fun, and that was it. Because my heart wasn't tangled up in feelings, he felt safe. We decided for our second date that we would go tubing down a river that runs through our town. We parked his orange truck at the end of the tubing run and took the tubes in my truck upriver. We agreed that he would zip my truck key into his pocket onto his shorts, and that he would drop me off at my truck afterwards. Bright summer heat warmed our skin, and the water felt crisp and fresh on our toes. The afternoon slipped past as we floated downriver. When we reached the bottom, we deflated our tubes and headed back to my truck. Only, when Derek reached into his pocket, his face sank. He looked at me and said, "Your key is gone." I laughed. Surely he was joking. He insisted this wasn't a joke. Gravity pulled at my stomach, and I began to panic. This was the only copy of my truck key, and I had taken it on the river. I felt foolish, and worried about how I would get a new key if we couldn't find it. The river was long, and we'd been tubing for hours. We'd stopped at several places to swim. He offered to drive me home, and I accepted. During the drive, we made a plan to meet up for the next day and search for my key at some of the stops we had made. We spent the next afternoon combing our swimming holes for my key. Up and down we swam, with very little hope that we'd ever see my keys again. We had to try though, and we kept at it. From one spot to another, we dove and we swam and we moved on. The very last place we checked, as the light of the afternoon faded into a hazy orange, something caught his eye. Underwater near the shore were my keys. We were elated. We could not believe our luck. To celebrate, we went back to his place for some drinks. He drove me down a long wooded driveway, and at the very end was a shaded trailer. He told me that he was only renting a room here from an elderly couple, but they were on vacation, so we would be alone. We walked over the creaking porch and entered the trailer. Inside, I could see the kitchen was messy, not just a couple of dishes, but every surface was covered with mess. He ushered me away to show me his room. It was small, and not very clean either. Dirty clothes, mattress on the floor, a Rubbermaid bin with some snacks like Doritos and cheap warm beer. We had sex. The yellow light of the trailer accented the stains on the walls. Afterwards, the spark of fun I had felt when we first met had withered, and I felt gross. I decided that this would be our last date. A week passed, and we hardly texted. Our brief fling was ending, and I didn't expect to see him again. My mind had moved on to other things. This coming weekend, my friends were coming to town, and I was excited. We made plans to go to karaoke together on a Saturday night. When the day arrived, I was surprised to see a text from Derek on my phone. "Are you going to karaoke tonight?" it read. I responded that I was, and he texted back saying that he would be there. "I thought you didn't like karaoke," I asked him. He said that he had been invited by a girl he worked with, and thought he should give me a heads up that he would be on a date, in case I was there. I thanked him for taking the time to let me know, reassured him that I wouldn't be bothered at all, and said that I hoped he had a great date. Around 9:30 that night, my friends and I arrived at the bar. The dim lights and reflective foil stars, an all too familiar scene. We got our drinks, picked a booth with a good view of the stage. I had a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I turned my head, scanned the bar, and our eyes locked. Derek and his date were a few booths away, and he was watching us. He waved zealously with a big smile. His date turned around to look, and I managed an awkward wave. I was absolutely fine with him being on a date, but I did not want to advertise that we had known each other or make his date uncomfortable. My friends were all aware of the time we had spent together, my thoughts on the experience, and the text he had sent me earlier. We were all thinking it was a bit odd that he would go out of his way to interact with me in front of his date. But no harm, no foul. He was just being friendly. The evening carried on. We all had a great time, basking in the atmosphere, drinking in the songs and laughter. A couple of hours in, we were sitting in our booth when Derek stumbled over to our table with his date. He introduced her as Kate and plopped down beside me, pulling her down in the booth next to him. A strong smell of alcohol oozed off of them, and I could see that they were hammered. It became obvious they had both had way too much to drink. Their eyes were glazed and words slurred. Kate seemed really nice, despite her state, and she launched into a drunk story to the whole table. My friends and I were fairly uncomfortable and were unsure what was going on. Under the table, I felt Derek's sticky hand slide onto my thigh. His date was right there, and I was stunned. Without making a scene, I subtly removed his hand and excused myself to get another drink. As I walked across the room, I could feel his eyes racking my back. Sure enough, when I was turned around, he was watching. When I got back, Kate was slurring that her taxi had come. She and Derek had exchanged a sloppy kiss and goodnights, and then it was just us and Derek. Derek's mood shifted after that. He was drunkenly unaware of how uncomfortable the table was, and we could tell he was brooding about his date having left without him. Derek turned his attention to me. He slung his heavy arm over my shoulder and leaned in, his sour breath managing to come together to form clumsy sentences. "You're so cute. I love your laugh." I was rigid and just wanted him to leave. When he got up to get another beer, my friends and I spoke about the situation. One of them remarking, "You know you can do better than this, right?" I said yes. As casual as this had been, I had made a mistake. We came to the conclusion it would be best if we ended the night early, as we didn't see him leaving me alone. As a backup plan if anything went south, we agreed that the girls would go to the bathroom and leave out the back door while our male friend would distract him and slip away. Derek arrived back at the table. Sloshing his beer onto his front, he slurred, "Where are we going next?" I hesitated, but my friend told him that we would all be going home. Derek said he would walk us up there, and we politely declined. He was leaning up against a wall and barely holding himself at this point. We asked him how he was going to get home and if we could call him a cab. Derek drunkenly pouted that he could just come to my place with me. Trying to shut him down as politely as I could, I told him that my child was there with the sitter, so I couldn't have him over. He refused a taxi and said he would just sleep in his truck. Since his eyelids were drooping, I looked at the rest of his state. It seemed reasonable that he would be able to fall asleep in his truck, and we accepted that answer. As we started to leave, he stumbled after us. We stopped and reminded him that we were going to bed. He argued again, saying that he should come with me. My friends and I locked eyes. It was time to engage with our backup plan. The two girls and I excused ourselves to the washroom while our friend distracted him. Slipping out the back door, the cool rush of night air hit us, and we hurried back to the path that led to our hotel. Our friend caught up with us and said that he had left Derek behind at the bar. We were all relieved to be out of there and started to walk back to our hotel. One of the girls was sober and offered to drive me home when we got back to the hotel, and I gladly accepted. A few minutes down the path, my phone began to ring. I looked at the caller ID and felt my stomach drop. It was Derek. I turned the volume down and let it ring, and to my surprise, he left a voicemail. I turned on the speaker and played it loud. Derek's voice sounded confused as his words melted together into the phone.
Where are you guys? Thought we were gonna hang out. I don't understand.
We were all glad we had left, and agreed that this had been wild. That's when the phone rang again. Another voicemail popped up on my screen. In the dim light of the trail, I played the new voicemail aloud once more. His drunken speech was more intense this time, as he launched into how he didn't understand why I had left, and I had hurt his feelings, and that he was in love with me. The tone of his voice shook me when I heard him say,
I love you.
There was something dark and heavy about it that left me unsettled. We were all creeped out, but happy to see the bright sign of the hotel ahead. We traveled the carpeted hallway to their room so my friend could grab her keys to take me home. As we entered the room, my phone began to ring once again. This time, the voicemail sent shockwaves of fear through my body. Derek's voice had taken on an edge, as he repeated that he loved me but was actually really fucking mad at me for leaving him at the bar. He went on about how I could do that to him. He didn't know what he was going to do. His voice shook with anger as he stumbled over himself, expressing how I betrayed him. The last thing he said before hanging up and echoing in the hotel room,
You know, I'm really starting to fucking hate you.
this guy was unhinged. I was terrified. I was grateful this side of Derek hadn't shown up when we were alone in that secluded trailer. My friends gave me a hug and told me to call them if I needed anything and to keep them updated. My friend took me home, and as I unlocked the door and stepped out of the comfort of my home, I felt exhausted. It had not been the night out as I expected, and Derek's erratic behavior had really freaked me out. Fresh out of an abusive relationship, his actions at the bar, then the voicemails rang some all too familiar bells. That's when I saw the headlights. It was late for anyone to be driving down my street. I peeked through the curtain, and my blood ran cold, and I trembled. Sitting in the cab of his orange truck was Derek. Mind racing, I panicked. This dude could barely hold himself up when we left. He was blackout obliterated. How did he drive across town to my house? How did he find me? I immediately remembered the other week when he had dropped me off after I lost my keys. How could I have been so stupid? I barely knew him. We had only met 3 times. Derek's face was stony and etched with rage as he sat in the dark cab staring at my house. He wasn't getting out. He was just staring. I was on my hands and knees peeking out the window. All the lights were off inside. I was sure he couldn't see me. Then the screen on my phone lit up. He was calling me again. I quickly hid it so he wouldn't see the light. Hands shaking, I played the voicemail as quietly as I could. Derek only said one thing this time, a phrase that sent terror shooting down my spine. In a drunk, sing-songy voice, almost taunting me, he quietly said,
Where are you?
Click. I was terrified. Somehow, I really hadn't considered I could be in danger, and chalked all the fear to my past experiences. Surely I was overreacting, and it was my fault for reading too much into this. I shouldn't be this scared, and I don't want to make a scene. That last voicemail sealed the deal. I figured even if I was overreacting, at the very least he was a drunk driver. Called 911, and the dispatcher said someone would be there in a couple of minutes. As I peeked out the window, I saw him get out of his truck. He was done waiting. His heavy feet stumbled as they hit the pavement, and he looked around. Derek's voice cut through the night. He started yelling my name. The wild anger in his voice was tangible through the walls. He just yelled into the street, "Where are you? Where are you?" Derek started to stumble towards my house, and then with the red flashing and blue lights cascading down the street, lighting up his face, and highlighting every ounce of rage carved into his features, 2 police cars pulled up, and the officers got out. I was still peeking out from inside my dark house, and I couldn't hear much of what was happening. I watched them breathalyze him, which he obviously failed. The officers inspected his truck, and they all spoke for a while, and one of the officers came up to my door. I spoke to them about what had happened, and he was very empathetic. He said, as unsettling as his actions have been, there wasn't much they could do without a direct threat. The officer let me know that they would be taking him in for the night, and that he would be charged with drunk driving, but that he would be out tomorrow, so make sure I kept my doors locked and stayed safe. The tow truck came to remove his orange truck from the road, and I could see him arguing. The officers weren't having any of it, and they turned him around to cuff him. As the handcuffs locked around his wrist, he yelled out one last time, looking directly at the window I was peeking out. "I know you're in there. Why don't you come out and say goodnight?" As quickly as my street had filled up, it was empty. Quiet shadows of the late night swallowing the earlier chaos into nothingness. Derek texted me the next afternoon. I'm very sorry about last night. I was in a bad place. I responded that his actions were unacceptable, and how dare he show up at my house where my child lives at, and that I would prefer to never hear from him again. He apologized one last time, and I haven't heard from him since. Over the next few months, I would see him on a bike going to and from his workplace, so I know he lost his license. I was always weary that we would bump into each other again, which thankfully never happened. I can only imagine how much angrier he was after that night he lost his license. I found out that he moved to the mainland a while back, which was quite a relief for me, and no longer feel as on edge around town. So Derek, let's never meet again.